So, a lot of material today. Hopefully I can, as I spoke with Mr. Mike Hachimonji, hopefully I can simplify this stuff because it's so complicated and explain it as clearly as I can. But we're going to continue on our survey of the world's religions, cults, and philosophies. And today we're going to talk about a mindset, a philosophy that is in our culture today called postmodernism. Okay? But before I begin, let me see. What I do is I hand out notes with fill-ins. I know that, you all are busy, have a lot of information, but I don't have a book for this class, and because I'll be teaching different religions and philosophies, I'm just gonna give handouts every week. And if you will, please, if you intend to come to this class for the duration of the 8 months, if you can just put it in a binder. What I do is I put them in a binder, and it's gonna be, in order. So, for example, we're doing postmodernism for the next 2 weeks. If I don't finish, it'll be 3 weeks. And then from postmodernism, I'll begin the first religion or philosophy, which is Hinduism, and then Buddhism, and then we go from there to New Age. It's really in order, so it would be to your benefit if you put all these handouts into some binder, and then hopefully by the end of the 8 months, you'll have a whole book where it can be a reference for you that you can put in your personal library to refer back to. So as I survey the religions, really what I'm trying to do, some of this stuff is going to be very technical. I'm not giving a sermon. Some of this stuff is going to be tedious, even boring, but I believe it's going to be valuable information. Of course, I cannot cover everything. I don't know everything, but if I can give you a superficial glimpse of every religion, hopefully, as you go through this course, you will be able to, some will resonate with you more than others because maybe you have a friend or family member that struggle with those issues or have those belief systems. And hopefully, if that religion or that philosophy resonates with you because of your relationships, then you can focus in, onto that particular lecture. Okay, so that's my intention, to create different handouts so that you'll have a book by the end of our classes here, our semester here. So let me just pray before we begin. God, standing before me are people that seek to love you, they seek to understand you, and I believe, God, that they want, their relatives, friends, and neighbors, co-workers to know you too. That's the hope, God, as you, Holy Spirit, are inside of us, and your desires for the world to be redeemed. The prayer then is to help us understand the world better, not in a way that we would succumb to the world, but in a way where we would identify what is it about them that is in error, that is not in accord with who you are, and how can we help those people? The more we understand people and their belief systems, the more we can identify truth and error, truth with error, and the more we can love them with your truths. So that's my hope, my prayer for us as we go through this, session together. Lift up today to you, in Jesus' name, amen. Postmodernism 1, 1 Chronicles 12:32 says, men of Issachar who understood the times and knew what Israel needed to do. There are certain people that understand the climate, their times, what the culture is, how the culture thinks. And I think scripturally, we need to do the same. We need to understand the times. What is going on with our culture and how people think that's causing them to react the way that they do. That's causing them to react the way they do towards Christians, towards the church. So for us, as we understand more, the whole idea is that we become more effective missionaries. We're all called to be missionaries, not just the pastor, not just the missionary, but everyone here, if you've given your life to Jesus Christ, you're called to be a missionary of some kind. So we're going to study this philosophy, this mindset that's in our culture today called postmodernism. But before I go, let me just ask you guys here, anyone here studied postmodernism? Anyone here know what postmodernism is? Anyone? You can just throw anything out there. It's very complicated, so my goal really is to try to keep it as simple as possible. Let me look through some periods that led to, in history, that had led to postmodernism today. But before I go on to these periods explaining them, let me just first say that there are definitely boundaries. There are definitive periods of time where there was a shift in cultures, shift in thinking. However, as I studied, and as some of you have studied, these different periods, you and I both know by our experience that the way these cultures the way that these periods think are in all of us today. In other words, how modernists think, although it's in one particular period, it's also here today, right now. It's just a mix of everything together. But there's a definite boundary, a definite shift at one point in time from one period to the next. So let's begin with the pre-modern period, which includes ancient period from 776 BC to 476 AD, the Greco-Roman period, where began with the Olympic Games and ended with the destruction or the fall of the Roman Empire, according to most historians. Middle Ages, medieval times, right? 476 AD to 1592 AD. Not sure if it's exact, but that's what I found. In those periods, art, literature, and philosophy glorified God. They glorified God. They still believed that the supernatural world exists. Okay? Demons, ghosts, supernatural world. God is omnipotent. God is omniscient. God reveals truth to people. Okay? There is truth. Truth exists, and God reveals that to people. And then there became a shift in modern times from 1300 AD around there to 1900 called the modern period. And that included three periods that were very influential. The Renaissance period from 1300 to 16 AD. Renaissance meaning rebirth. Okay? So you got guys like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, who was really good at just about everything. Art, literature, philosophies, just about everything. And they shifted the emphasis just by their work. They shifted the emphasis of art, literature, and philosophy that glorified man. Enlightenment period came. Enlightenment, age of reason, 1600 to 1700s. A guy by the name of Voltaire came by and he said, God left us alone. He exists, but he's in the sky somewhere. He left us alone. He doesn't really help us. Therefore, we need to help ourselves. We need to use our reason. That's enlightenment. We need to use our reason to figure out how things work to help ourselves. There is a rejection of that time towards God and the supernatural. When I say reject, I don't mean that they don't think God, they're saying that God doesn't exist. That's not necessarily true. They're saying that God is somewhere out there. He doesn't really care to help us. We don't really think about him. We don't consider him in our decision making. We just do whatever we can on our own. And so enlightenment, we use our reason. Industrial revolution came at a time where there was great technological advances, right? That period of 1700 to 1900, a lot of inventions, okay? Improvement, progress. What happened then is that because there was a lot of progress, man began to look inward to their self and not upwards to God. Charles Darwin came by, right? It's not about creation. If anyone need more notes, Kenny has it. Thank you for making the copies, Kenny. So Darwin comes by, and it's all about the survival of the fittest, right? If you're stronger, you're smarter. Strong eats the weak, right? Forget about creation. In creation, the strong helps the weak, right? But in evolution, the strong eats the weak. And so it's all about yourself. I'm going to leave out God. So all of this stuff makes the modern period all about man. It's me. It's man-centered. And what can I do as a man? Since God left us alone, what can I do through my reason, through science, right? Sir Isaac Newton was there, through science, to discover what's outside of myself. One thing about the modern period is that there are still absolutes. There's still absolute truth, a universal guiding principle that's beyond my church, beyond my community, beyond my neighborhood. It's just that I've got to go outside of my community. I've got to study and educate myself. I've got to use science and reason to figure out what that absolute principle is to help me and my company live. So it's all about man-centered. God does exist, but he doesn't really care about us. Okay, so there came a time then when the modern period, which ended around the 1900s, and although it flowed into the early 1900s, came the postmodern period, early 1900s to current. Stanley Grenz, who is a theologian and a Baptist, he passed away. He wrote a lot of good books. He identifies postmodernism as a cultural phenomenon. The quest to move beyond modernism, specifically, it is a rejection of the modern mindset. Okay? It's a rejection of absolutes. There are no absolutes. There's no universal truths. Whatever happens, why? Because I came from a certain community, and someone else might have came from Japan. We came from two different communities that don't know each other. We have our own ways of thinking. And therefore, whatever your way is, it's good, it's valid. Whatever my way is, it's good and valid. I tolerate you, you tolerate me, and we just leave each other alone. We don't try to convert each other. There's no overarching universal truth that directs our lives. Anything goes, then God is up to your interpretation. I'll go into this more in detail. So I'm going to focus in on modernism and postmodernism for a specific reason, because I really believe that these two mindsets are in today's culture. Okay, so let's look at some of these tenets of modernism and postmodernism. I have all these notes, but I'm going to try to go as slow as I can. If you have any questions, please, feel free to ask. If I can answer it, I'll try my best. But if I don't finish today, I'm just going to continue next time, okay? So here's some tenets of modernism and postmodernism. Modernism is about industry, okay? It's about an industry. It's about a factory. That's a symbol, right? It's about a structure. It's about a universal principle from that structure that is rationale, that directs us, and it's about processes. It's about something that's very orderly, linear, and it moves towards a certain direction. Okay, you repeat, as long as you know what this process is, you repeat it over and over and over again, and you'll achieve some end that's a benefit to you. So the symbol being a factory, streamline, assembly line, the machine. The machine works, it's static, right? It works itself over and over again in a certain way. It's very cost effective. It's cost efficient. So I brought this video. Unfortunately, I don't have the sound. But it's literally, this video is Charlie Chaplin. It's called Modern Times. You'll get the idea about the factory. I wish I had the sound, but okay. So you get the picture of a modern time, right? You got the factory, which is a symbol, right? And everything is streamlined. The process is the same. There's this structure in place, and the structure directs your life, and you just have to repeat it over and over again, and you will arrive at some benefit. You will achieve something. Unless you have personality like Charlie Chaplin, you kind of throw things off a little bit, right, with your personality. But even the boss, at the very end, the boss comes and he kind of yells at him. He says, "You're not doing your job." So there's an authority. There's an authority that kind of directs you. So there's universal truth. There's absolutes. It still exists. Now, the next one then would be the shift then of our thinking today is postmodernism. Symbol of that would be the computer. Okay, so when the internet came into existence, right, we had an explosion of information. Whereas before, we read our encyclopedias, those people, those experts that have done their research by researching books in the library or journals. But now all you have to do is look into the internet and you can travel to Russia, South Africa, Middle East, China, Japan, anywhere you want. You can study and learn about different subjects in a matter of time. So there's an explosion of information. And this information explosion then kind of throws people off a little bit, because whereas before there was we depended on this one particular expert who has put a lot of time on this, issue, now I become the expert. And I can study everything. I can study every topic that's out there. And then I realized that what I believed, what this expert taught before is wrong, because they teach it differently in Japan. They teach it differently in Russia. Same topic. And therefore, I don't even know which one is right. So now, this information caused a different type of shift, right? That there's not really one universal truth. There's not really one process. There's not a linear way of doing things. There's different ways of doing things, and they're all the same. Not one is better than the other. So another tenet of modernism would be meta-narrative, which is a grand story, right? Which there's a universal grand story, like the Bible. Okay? This grand story has a lot of individual stories in it. There are 66 books in it. There are 66 smaller stories within this one book, but this universal principle, this universal God, or universal whatever you want it to, whatever you think it is, directs those individual stories. This grand story is greater than the individual stories. In postmodernism, it's the individual stories. If I looked in the internet and I saw that Japan has a different way of, cooking their vegetables than in the U.S., that's their story. Who am I to say that there's one overarching directive for both cultures? Their truth, their way of cooking vegetables is equal to my way of cooking vegetables. Not one is better than the other. Then the next tenet would be absolutes. Absolutes then exist, right? In modern times. In postmodern times, relativity exists. Truth is relative. Truth then comes from each individual. I'll explain it more later. It comes from inside of you. It's not discovered through science on the outside. Truth also comes from the community that you grew up in. You relate that to religion? People would say, well, it's no fault of your own, if you grew up in Saudi Arabia and you're a Muslim, because that's what your community taught you. You never had an opportunity to learn another religion. Therefore, your religion, Islam, is equal to mine. I'm a Christian. That's how some people think today, by the way. They do. I've met them. Some of them are my friends, actually. There's objective truth, right? There's something that's objective. I just put my mind into it. I put this process together. I figured out what that is. Postmodern times, subjective. Depends on each individual. It comes from inside of you. Modernity believes that human progress is good, right? Through a streamline, through a structure, through this universal directive, I'm moving towards some good, through education, through science. If I just educate myself, if I just study hard, I'm going to achieve some benefit. But here's the tail end of it. The world's going to improve. The world has to improve because as I improve myself, everybody in their community improves themselves. The world has improved. Well, postmodernism came in the 1930s. At least the ideal began then. They looked at the world and they said, wait a minute. The world is full of powerful structures. You can put a name in there, a political figure if you want. People start criticizing, right? The world is full of rich and powerful companies, rich and powerful people. We all have truth, but what happens is that only the rich and powerful gets to voice what those truths are. They control it. They oppress. And what happens is we've seen that the rich and powerful has ruled the world, every country, or even your company, but the world hasn't progressed. It has regressed, right? There might be a lot of individual stories, it can go on and on, as related to religion, but religion is bad because it's those who are powerful in a religion who controls others. Like in Islam, they look at Islam, right? And they said those who are powerful, we're looking at the terrorists, those who are powerful cause people to strap a bomb onto themselves and blow up a building or something. So it's the powerful people who are able to voice what they believe, what their truth is, but they use it to oppress. Religion is dangerous. We should stay away from holy books. All holy books are equal. Not one is better than the other. Christianity is not better than the other. Why is Christianity better? This is the belief they have, right? There was the Crusades, right? They fought each other. The Muslims and the Christians fought each other. They both tried to oppress each other. Both, whoever's more powerful wins. So we got to be careful. We got to be skeptical. Nothing is really certain. That's the next one. In modernity, everything is certain. Through a process, everything is certain and predictable. And in postmodernism, we just don't understand. I mean, the world is so big. You turn on the computer, you get confused. There's so much information. I'm confused. It's chaotic. People fight. I don't even know what I believe anymore. I grew up a Christian. I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about the mindset. I don't even know what I believe anymore. I grew up in a church. My parents were really good. They taught me the Bible. My parents are good citizens. They treated me well. The people in my church are good. But then when I went to the university, I realized there are other people who are good. I turned on the computer. I realized there are other religions that are good. So I don't, and then recently I dated a guy, and he said he was Christian, but he was not very nice. That guy right there, that's not a Christian. He's of another faith. He's nicer than my boyfriend. You start getting confused on a very practical, personal level, and you're not even certain anymore because there's so much information, and it all exploded. It all just came at you at once. You don't even know what you believe anymore. Whereas your parents, they knew. Your parents knew because they read the Bible. That was what's the most important thing. But the kids don't know. I would venture to say that some people actually think that today, because of postmodernism, modernism, by the way, started it because people say, well, God left us alone, right? He's out there in the sky somewhere. You got to use your own faculties to succeed. But postmodernism finished it, right? Because not one truth is better than the other. Christianity is not better than Buddhism. So what happens is that some people have said that leads into something called post-Christianity, right? We're not even a Christian nation anymore. Some people believe. I believe we're still a Christian nation, but it's definitely not the whatever percentage, 85, whatever percent that people say that Christians in the U.S. is definitely not that. And if you go to the cities, it's even less, right? What I mean by post-Christian is that the Bible's not even considered. It's not even considered in their daily living. Whereas for many of us here, it is, because that's what we grew up with, but we also read the Bible and we know God to be true. So I would say that a modernist mindset, because it believes in absolutes, is still closer to the Bible, right? And that's the whole emphasis of my talk today. That modernism is not, and it has good and bad, right? But it's still man-centered. It's man-centered, but it still acknowledged God. It still acknowledged some universal principle which you can discover. It's not all about God revealing it to you, like through the Bible. It's about you figuring out on your own through your own faculties, right? Your own reason. But it still believes in a universal truth, a universal directive. It still believes in absolutes, which is very important. But when you come to the age where people don't even know what to believe anymore, postmodernism, or what I believe is the same as what you believe, although both beliefs are contradictory, that becomes dangerous. That's about individual stories, right? It's about your testimony. It's about your experience. It's not about a directive that God has given us. So I still think modernism is closer to the Bible than postmodernism, but I think both mindsets exist today. But I think there's a danger in postmodernism. That's what I want to focus on today, the dangers of postmodernism. Look at this illustration. You got a modernist versus a postmodern building. Modernist architect may regard postmodern as buildings as vulgar, whereas a postmodern architect may regard many modern buildings as soulless, bland, and boring, right? Because one is streamlined, one is linear, and the other one is more creative. This is the Guggenheim building in Bilbao, Spain, northern Spain. This is a postmodern building. People really respect this building a lot. What I have here. Why? It's by a guy by the name of Frank Gehry, because it's creative. It's subject to one's interpretation. It represents the postmodern mind exactly, a reaction against modernism, a reaction against something that is linear. So the design on this building is not straightforward. It doesn't have logical schemes like the modern mind. There is no straight line in this building because every wall is curved. Every angle you look at from gives you a new perspective of the building. There are no two photographs of the Guggenheim that ever look the same. With the absence of visual absolutes, the Guggenheim is considered an embodiment of the concept of postmodernism. So, what the idea is, for a young person like Colin, or maybe not Colin in himself, I don't worry, I point at you sometimes so I make sure you're paying attention. But anyways, for a young person that grew up in a postmodern culture, I'm not saying he is postmodern. I'm just saying he grew up in a postmodern culture. They understand there's a lot of information. They understand there's a lot of stuff. I even talked to him last week, that's why I maybe talked to him on the taco line. He said, man, there's a lot of information. I got to process it all. They just understand that's their life. So what happens is that someone that grew up in the church, they grow up in a church. Mom and dad teaches them the Bible. Their Sunday school teacher, their pastor teaches them the Bible. They just believe it. Then when they go to the university, you need diversity, right? The concept of the university is that it's an arena, it's a structure, but it's diverse, and it has diverse teachings, diverse ideas, but they all need to be unified. You all have to accept each other. You all have to believe each other's systems as being equal to yourself. So what happens is that you grow up Christian. I think I mentioned a stat last week that 80%, it's like 88% of kids that go to college fall away from Christ within 4 years, okay? Within 4 years, they fall away from Christ. Most of them came to know Jesus in junior high, at camp, or when they're young. But they fall away within 4 years of college. And I've seen a lot of that to be true. If not, some of them are struggling with their faith. It's because for the first time in their lives, they're faced with this, right? And so what happens is that the college tells them, you need to deconstruct. This idea of there's this word called deconstruction. Jacques Derrida, I'm not sure about, Jacques Derrida is a French philosopher in the 1930s. He's the one who coined this term deconstructionism, right? It's really a reaction against the modern mindset. It's the breakdown of the structure. And so what it is that you begin to deconstruct what you have learned, what you grew up with. You deconstruct your religion. You take it down like a building, and you create another one, a buffet, a building with different angles, different ideas, and you make it to something like that. It's supposed to be better for you. And so that's what the kids are struggling with. And so I talked about a pastor last week. Some of you have heard this by the name of Joshua Harris. Most of us that remember him, he wrote I Kissed Dating Goodbye, which kind of influenced the movement. He wrote it, I believe, 25 years ago. And he's been a pastor at a mega church for years. And he just renounced his faith a couple months ago online. He renounced his faith and he divorced his wife. And here's a quote that I found from Christianity Today on Joshua Harris. He says, I have undergone, here it is, a massive shift in regard to my faith in Jesus. The popular phrase for this is deconstruction. The biblical phrase is falling away. By all the measurements that I have for divining a Christian, all those measurements, right? The process of gleaning universal truth from the Bible. By all those measurements, I am not a Christian. Many people tell me that there is a different way to practice faith, and I want to remain open to that, but I'm not there yet. Many people are already bombarding him with different ideas of what real faith is. We'll talk about that a couple months from now. New Age, right? Bombardment of a buffet of different religions and philosophies, but he's not there yet. He has deconstructed his building, his Christianity. He's just trying to reconstruct another building now. He's not sure exactly what that is. So I give him credit for being honest, but I feel extremely sad because he has influenced so many Christians in the past. I do not believe, I'm nowhere near where he is. I hope no one else is, but I'll be honest with you, many of my Christian friends that I grew up with are in the same camp as he is. That's why I wanted to talk about postmodernism times, because I believe that is pervasive. I believe it's dangerous. I believe that it's with us today. How much time we got? It's 10 o'clock right now. Let me just go into some of these. I'm going to be giving you more details of what postmodernism is, and I'm going to give us some. I'm going to ask you to help me figure out how to respond to some of these postmodern ideas. This is school, right? It's like Sunday school. So let's try to help each other. Let's go on. This is from Josh McDowell. I went to a conference of his, and I took some notes. This is what he said. What he said here, he wrote this book many years ago, but I believe it's still in effect today. Okay, so that's why I'm using some of his notes. It's important to know the postmodern mindset for world missions, because in over 80% of the world, there are two distinct cultures between adults and the youth. As he traveled around and spoke in many different parts of the world, he mentioned specifically South America, although these ideas come from Europe. There's two distinct cultures between adults. There's two different mindsets. Adults have a modern mindset. The younger people have a postmodern mindset. To illustrate this, he's going to illustrate it using language. So there's a word for that. Let's illustrate the postmodern mindset using language. The first word we're going to talk about in postmodernism is tolerance. The word tolerance. So there are two different meanings of this word in at least 80% of the world today. Traditional tolerance, the tolerance that adults, grandparents, and parents think, it means putting up with someone's beliefs or values you do not agree with. You're in the LGBT, right? The lesbian, gay. You're in that. I don't agree with your lifestyle or your thinking, but I tolerate you. I can be friends with you. I just don't agree with it. New tolerance, postmodern tolerance, means all beliefs, values, and lifestyles are equal. If you say your belief, if I say my belief is greater than yours, if I try to convert you because I'm a Christian and you're not, then I'm a bigot. I'm trying to oppress you with my religion, with my information. Because really, what I believe is not better than what you believe. The Children's Scholastic Dictionary defines tolerance as the willingness to accept customs, beliefs, and opinions of others. The key word there is accept, because it is saying to accept them as equal to your own. So I was pastoring a church a few years back. This is a very controversial topic. I don't really like to bring it up unless I think it through a lot. But I was pastoring a church. This is something that happened. I was pastoring a church about 4 years ago in San Mateo, California, up north, Northern California. And you remember when they passed the gay marriage law, right? And I was at camp when one of my guys texted me and said, hey, I can't believe it. So-and-so who goes to our church, who identifies herself as a Christian, who is my friend, who is someone that I pastor, someone who's been a Christian for about 5 years. I can't believe it. So-and-so went on Facebook and put the rainbow, that flag on her thing and say, oh, praise God, the gay marriage law passed. That's awesome, you know? And so what happens in my church, in my little church that I was pastoring, there became one person who believed that gay marriage was good. And the people that grew up, she's only been a Christian for 5 years, but she really believed that it's really good, and that they should not be deprived. If you're in love, you should not be deprived. Doesn't matter what gender you are, you should not be deprived of that. And then there's a whole group of people that believes that she's wrong. And so what happens, instead of me just doing my normal job, I have to put out fires because they begin arguing through Facebook. This is my church, and it's because it's small, they begin arguing, and I had to just put out fires. And it just kind of dawned on me that some people can say that I believe in this thing, right? But I believe in this thing, but when it comes to individual communities, individual stories, I'm not going to shut that out. I think that we should not shut people out. I think we should let them do it, whatever their individual stories tell them is best. And so I think the people should be allowed to get married because they're people, they're in love. And there shouldn't be a universal principle that guides their life. Before I continue, let me just say this. Okay, obviously I don't believe in gay marriage, but let me just say this. I love people. It doesn't matter what orientation you are. I love you. I had 2 roommates in San Francisco that were gay. Why did I live with them? I didn't have to live with them, but I chose to live with them because that culture up there is the LGBT. There are a lot of people from that group, right, organization that live up there, and I chose to live with 2 of them, and I ministered to them. I was friends with them. See, here's the thing. I love them. I don't agree with their lifestyle. In fact, one of them didn't even agree with the lifestyle. He got out of it. When I first met him, he was dressed as a woman. He had women's clothes on. And through a process of going to Bible study, he gave that up. He started dressing like a man again, and he grew a beard, and he started liking women again. After I'm not saying I have anything to do with it, but I live with the guy. But what I'm trying to say is that, look, homosexuality is very complex. I'm not here to give us a lecture on that. It's very complex. But it's okay for me to believe in this thing and say that I don't agree with that lifestyle, and yet I'm going to love those people, right? I'm going to love the people, and I'm going to help them figure out how to live out their lives in the orientation they believe that they're born with. Okay? So there's a big difference of how someone who grew up in a modernist mindset thinks than someone who grew up in a postmodern mindset. And I had to really put up with both, and it was really hard. I'm speaking about Christians now. Christians are the ones I'm scared of. I remember I worked for 2 different churches in San Francisco. One, the gay parade. Talk about 2 Christian churches. One of them was a Lutheran church, and one of them believed in going down to downtown San Francisco in a gay parade and putting up signs and just kind of saying, you guys are sinners. I didn't really agree with that. But the other one I worked with, is a church plant, I didn't agree with them either. They also went down to the parade. These are 2 Christian churches. One's modern, one's extreme modern, and one's extreme postmodern. The extreme postmodern one believed in taking a table down there and putting up a sign and say, I'm sorry. We are sorry, Christians, for berating you. We are sorry. So that's their starting point, is that we're sorry. I don't necessarily agree with that either, because what am I sorry for? The Christians that have berated homosexuals don't represent me. They don't represent many Christians, right? There are a few groups out there, right? One being a church in Kansas City, but there are a few Christians who are just judgmental. I would say condemning more than, but they don't represent me. So I work with 2 churches that do not know how to respond to a gay parade, a gay pride parade, but it's just one's extreme modernist and one's extreme postmodernist. Let me go on. Symbol of tolerance. Symbol of tolerance and intolerance. So there is American artist of Spanish descent, and he came with this thing called the Piss Christ. Anybody heard of this? I'm giving you a reality. It's an R-rated word, but it's giving a reality of our culture. If you're aware at all, you'll come up with these things, so I'm not really hiding anything. Here it is. What do you think? As a Christian. Okay, so what the Piss Christ is a crucifix dipped into a jar of urine, human urine. This has been duplicated and has been shown around the world. It even won awards. It won major awards for being great arts. And it's, you know why? Because it's seen as an act of tolerance. So when some Christians confronted Andre Serrano, you know what he said? He said, I had no idea Piss Christ would get the attention it did. Since I meant neither blasphemy nor offense by it, I've been a Catholic all my life, so I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. He's a committed follower of Jesus Christ according to him, and yet it's okay for him to take the symbol of Christianity and put it in a jar of his own urine, and promote it around the world, and let people give him awards for it because it's a work of art. What is the number one symbol of intolerance in 80% of the world today? The cross. You know why? Anybody? Thank you. That's exactly it. Because of John 14:6. Exactly it, Tim. John 14 says, anyone here knows what John 14:6 says? I'm talking about people that have read the Bible. They don't believe in it, but they've read it, so they know what John 14:6 is, and they use it against Christians. Here's John 14:6. Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one goes to the Father except through me. That's an exclusive truth claim. So people use this against Christians and saying, well, Jesus is prejudiced. Jesus is exclusive. Jesus, by the way, it's not true, right? I mean, just a superficial reading of the gospel, you know Jesus is not exclusive. But people will take things out of context for sure. Jesus only likes certain people. And therefore, anyone who wears this symbol, the cross, who believe, where Jesus allegedly died on it, is exclusive. Christians are exclusive. So you take this symbol of intolerance, the cross, and you dip it into urine. By the way, what do you think the people would think in this world? If you take a symbol, right? If you take a symbol of intolerance, this cross, and dip it into urine, then people will actually see it as tolerance. Does that make sense? One of the top symbols of tolerance today is, anyone know what the top symbols of tolerance in our culture today is in the U.S.? I'll give you a hint from San Francisco. You drive into the Castro district in the city, you will see this everywhere. Thank you. Rainbow. What do you think would happen if you take this rainbow and you dip it into human urine in today's culture? You'll be stoned. In San Francisco, you'll be stoned. In other places, you might get criticized. Because you're taking the number one symbol of tolerance and you're dipping it in urine, you have become intolerant. Okay. Have any reactions, any questions so far on the first illustration of language, which is tolerance? Postmodern tolerance. By the way, why do you guys even care? Why I mean, this philosophical stuff is so heady. I mean, it's even heady for me. But why do you guys even care? It might not impact you personally. We talk about church growth all the time, right? Is there a way that we can do church more effectively to the people out there that think that way? I think there is. I also venture to say some of our relatives struggle with this mindset. Okay, let's look at another word of this postmodern mindset. It's 10:15. The second one I'll give to you. Sorry, we'll continue in 2 weeks. I have so much notes that I can't finish. But the next word would be truth. Okay, we got to end. I'm sorry, I didn't even know it was 10:15. Let me pray. Father, thank you for everyone that's in here. We talked about some pretty, potent topics in our culture today. My goal here is to help people identify what's going on so that they will be more effective evangelists, God, missionaries, not because we'll be more judgmental and not because we'll be more condemning, but because we'll be more loving. That's my goal, God, that you will help us understand. And so I just pray as we go through about the day, go to church, that you'll help us process this information in a right way and live rightly, Lord, according to your will, not our own selfish will. Thank you, God. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks, you guys. See you next time.